Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us on this webinar. Today, we have Erin with us, who's going to help us walk us through how to use BlockSurvey for intake and application management. Erin, we are excited to have you here. Erin is a project manager at Hebrew SeniorLife Marcus Institute for Aging Research, where she leads digital project management and workflow optimization. Hebrew SeniorLife is one of the oldest senior care organizations in the US, an affiliate of Harvard Medical School and a parent of Lunder CareForce Institute, a new program training for the next generation of frontline healthcare workers. Today, she is here with us to share her knowledge on how to intake students to apply through applications and how to manage workflow at various stages. And she has used BlockSurvey to scale up to 600 plus applications. We have been working closely with Erin for the last 6 months, and she has helped us to tailor the experience specifically around application management inside the audience panel in BlockSurvey, be it running campaigns, specifically the bulk campaign and drip campaign. The maturity what BlockSurvey got to is because of constant feedback from Erin. She shaped us how to use BlockSurvey for not just for surveys, but then for deeper integrations with specifically focused on use cases like intake and application management. Erin, we are glad to have you here with us today. Over to you. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you. So let me just share my slides. Well, welcome. Thank you all for joining. So we're going to just talk today about thinking outside the survey, thinking outside BlockSurvey, and how Lunder CareForce manages 600 plus applications with BlockSurvey. So really, the Lunder CareForce Institute exists because we saw a large problem. I'm sure a lot of you know, but there is a really critical healthcare workforce shortage. And specifically what Hebrew SeniorLife deals with is that there is a growing aging population. We're all living longer. And so we have this growing aging population, but yet a decline in caregiver availability. And so demand is outpacing supply. There's driver turnover and costs, and then that creates this staffing instability, which in our mind is a huge problem. So Lunder CareForce is a new institute that provides a nurse aid training program, and we want to provide a workforce development initiative that is beyond just a training program and keeps people in these careers. So we're building this stable pipeline of certified nurse aides. And then our goal as we start with these programs is to build more advanced programs to get people into more advanced degrees, like, for example, LPNs, a licensed practical nurse. Okay, so what we do. So one of the other things that we saw is that there is a large untapped potential workforce. A lot of these people face many challenges as to why maybe they don't go into working for healthcare. It could be language barriers, it could be childcare needs, and it could be financial hardship, just to name a few. And we want to really look at the people as an individual and see how we can help them to build careers in healthcare, because there's this untapped potential and it could help everybody. So we want to look at this potential workforce, bring them into entry-level healthcare in positions such as a nurse aide. And then we want to be able to train them well, focus them on aging as much as possible for senior care, and then eventually make this pipeline go into a licensed practical nurse, for example. And what's novel about this idea is that we are a student-centered workforce, but really we do it in partnership with employers. So we try to, as much as possible, get people into a job with an employer sponsor who can help pay their way. Okay, so really, the operational reality is, though we have a parent company, Hebrew SeniorLife, essentially we're a startup. And so we needed to be able to scale quickly. We needed to be able to support a lot of applications and students, but yet we didn't know how many we would have when we were first starting. We knew that we would be having multiple cohorts starting at different times, but we also knew that we would have cohorts sometimes at the same time of classes for the nurse aid programs. And we also had to navigate compliance requirements and balancing the student experience with also the employer needs, who are our partners in this. So really the biggest challenge here was that we are a startup and we needed to be able to grow quickly. So when I was faced with looking at what it is that we would need and what systems we would use, some of the things that we were told we need out of a system is that number one is it needed to be secure and compliant. We needed to follow FERPA compliance and HIPAA compliance, which is related to education and healthcare. We needed a really quick deployment. They wanted an application up and running in about a month. We wanted to have automated communications, audience and database management, some CRM functionality. A big one was mail merge capabilities, centralized applicant tracking, reduction of duplicate submissions, and workflow automations. And really, as I've said, flexibility was important because as a startup, there are a lot of unknowns, and we needed to make sure that we could learn as we go and change the system as needed and not be stuck into one thing. And then we didn't want to have heavy IT dependency. And we also wanted to make sure we were managing our costs as much as possible because we didn't quite know exactly what we needed. And then white labeling was also ideal so that we could use our own domain and make sure it looked like everyone was really hearing from us and not necessarily from Lunder CareForce and not necessarily from whatever SaaS tool we were using. So traditional systems and super enterprise level systems were fabulous. We looked at a bunch of them, but ultimately what we didn't want as a startup was to be stuck in something that was too high level and we didn't even know yet what we wanted. So we didn't want a massive CRM rollout. We didn't want long implementation timelines where we were required to know exactly where we were going to spend the time to build it out. Again, we didn't want high licensing costs and we didn't want these rigid enterprise workflows. So flexibility and speed mattered more than complexity. So really, there was this shift in thinking with BlockSurvey where I had done a lot of research. I came across BlockSurvey. And so we stopped thinking about surveys as just a form, as these individual things. And we started thinking about a workflow and how we could be a little bit more scrappy with the system and use the system for how we needed it because BlockSurvey was very powerful. So we have these connected workflows that flow into evolving applicant records and a communications hub. So for the workflows, we have BlockSurvey connecting applications to then screening, employer matching we do in a more project management level system in Smartsheet, but then we do enrollment and onboarding and stuff within BlockSurvey. And then the big thing is these evolving applicant records where we have an audience panel that is connected to our surveys. And so we have the audience panel update with survey responses. So it becomes more like a CRM rather than these siloed surveys that we just look at. So our audience panel is continuously updating with new information from the various stages that I talked about on the left. And a huge thing that BlockSurvey really helped us with too was we said we don't want our audience panel to have all of these duplicates in it. So they helped to make it so that we could do email matching so that as applications come in, as other surveys come in that are relevant to the student pipeline, the audience panel is updating based off of email so that we're not worrying about always reconciling things. And then lastly, it's really a communications hub where we're tracking communications and sending out emails with mail merges and email campaigns. And eventually we will add in texting campaigns right in BlockSurvey. Okay, so I know that this is a big slide, but I want to spend a little bit of time on it just to show you how robust our workflow is within BlockSurvey. So we start with an application. The application is online and people can submit it. We wanted it to be where people could submit it as many times as they want, especially because part of the application, there are things in there that could change for people and make them eligible one day and not eligible another day. So we wanted people to be able to reapply. And with this reapplication, we wanted our audience panel to update and have that be automatic based off of email. And then I'll get into this a little bit later, but through this, we also wanted it to automatically map from the application whether someone was eligible or not. From the audience panel, we can send email campaigns for people who do get the rejection email if they're not eligible. And then we send an automated email campaign for a screening invitation for the people who are eligible. And then when people schedule a screening, the screening happens with SavvyCal, which is outside. But when they schedule a screening, during that screening, we have an English comprehension survey and a screening evaluation form, which are both in BlockSurvey, and then update our audience panel based off of the results. And from there, we have two routes. We can bring people to the self-pay route, which is newer, or an employer-sponsored route, which is really the bread and butter. And then once they get approved in one of these routes, and we do a lot of data collection with enrollment packets, getting secure documentation for vaccination records and physical forms that we want to make sure are secure. Once we get those, then and people pass, then we also send them a welcome email and next steps in onboarding. And so we're following this student from start to finish. Though we use some other tools, we're able to connect things as much as possible and do some pretty cool integrations. So for our application, obviously it's more than just this, but I just have a little snippet. We love that there are a bunch of different types of questions for any aspect of our workflow. The question types were robust, so it makes problem solving really great because we have the problem and I can be like, okay, maybe BlockSurvey can solve that because of these different types of questions and logic. So we have some logic in the application. It updates our audience panel. We're able to reduce duplication with emails. And then what's cool too is our marketing team wanted us to have specific links for ad tracking so we could see where applications were coming from ads. And so you're able to, in the share panel in a survey, you're able to make a special link that is to the same survey so that you can track special things like ads. Okay, so the variables and audience panel updates for eligibility was huge. Our eligibility, as we were growing, changed a little bit, and we needed to make sure that this part was robust and really helped us reduce admin burden because we needed to make sure at some point whether they had a high school diploma, what type of enrollment they wanted, if they consented to sharing their student record with an employer, if they were going to be employer sponsored. So there's multiple levels of whether they're screening eligible. And so we actually have two groups. This is just showing part of one, but we have two groups of screening eligibility that are pretty complex. And we were able to have it where we create this text variable and then it just says whether someone is screening eligible or not. And then that comes from the application and then it maps directly to the audience panel so that our admin coordinator already has a queue of what the next steps are. So we do a very similar thing. When people pass, if they're eligible for a screening, we send them an invite through BlockSurvey to schedule a screening. And then when they get to the screening, they have to do this English survey. The course is in English. It's about patient safety. So we have to make sure that their English is good enough to pass. We were able to do question groups with our English survey. It's cool because we can randomize within groups or you can randomize as a whole. But really, we don't have to go in and score, right? We set this up where there's another variable for English status. And based off of the score, it says whether someone passed or failed. And then what you're seeing here, like this is the survey, this is the back end of the survey to create this variable. And then this is in the audience panel where once this is submitted with someone's email, it tells us right away whether someone has passed or failed. Okay, so at the same time that they do the English survey, there's also a screening evaluation. So the English survey is completed by the candidate, and then the screening evaluation is completed by the screener/instructor. We needed advanced logic here, and that needed to change over time. We found that some people are no-shows to screening. Some people, we're not able to conduct the screening in English. And so the logic helps us here, right? So if someone says, no, they did not show up to the screening, then they don't have to answer all the questions, or they don't have to tell me separately. If their English isn't sufficient to conduct the interview, the logic is set so that they go right to the triage and they can say the English wasn't good. This is really helpful. And then I'm just showing a little bit of the back end where you have the audience list management. You pick your audience list and you map based off of email. And then we can also map variables rather than have to create them. So for example, submitted at, we map to screening evaluation in our audience panel so that we know exactly the date and time that the screening was done. And then triage and triage notes map to, and then the overall status we have automatically changed to screened to help our admissions coordinator. So The biggest thing here is that we really did need email campaigns. We needed to make sure that each step of the way we could email folks, have it be a mail merge. I know this seems simple, just first name, but you can do a lot of different things, and we do for each step. If you're in the brackets, you can put like employer sponsor or whatever your fields are in your audience panel. We do that often so that we can specialize the email to each person. And often the way we trigger emails is through columns. We add a date for when we want to send the email, and then that triggers the email. We could have it probably be more automated than that, but as I said before, something that's really important to us is making sure that each person is not just a number and their record gets touched. So we want to make sure that if they need help along the way or whatever it is, that we're there to help them. So again, we could make it more automated, but we choose to manually set the trigger so that we know that we've looked at their record and there's nothing else that needs to be done to help them through the process. And then, as Wilson talked about a little bit earlier, they've really helped make BlockSurvey more robust over the last 6 months. So one thing that was a challenge for us is that I was able to download records for who the email campaigns were sent to, but they updated it so we have this campaign tracker and you can see recipient details. So I can not only confirm, yes, the email has been sent, I can confirm the time it's been sent, if it's been opened. And then, of course, if they've opened a survey, if a survey is attached to it, sometimes they're not, depending on our workflow. But in this case, I'm able to not only see it, but see if they've opened to it and responded. So this was a major increase to our workflow. And then next is we keep providing solutions in this system because it can do a lot. So next up is we have self-pay students, which is pretty new. And so we are going to do a Stripe integration, which we've already started. And then soon enough, we're going to do text campaigns because a lot of the people we work with, email is not their preferred mode of communication. And so we will get that up and running. And that is all I've got for you. But I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Erin. I really appreciate you for sharing this. I have a question. This is specifically with respect to applicants coming in, right? So has there been a situation where maybe the applicants want to update their information?
So do you mean like update their application, right?
Yeah, update maybe the first application, what they submitted with you. Maybe they wanted to correct certain attributes. How do you manage them?
So that was something that was difficult at first because I'm more of a data person. I made the argument that we didn't want people to apply more than once. But
Uh-huh.
really, you have to realize that people's lives and situations change. And so the application could change. And so we did allow it on BlockSurvey. You can make it so that there aren't duplicate submissions or you can allow them. And so we did allow duplicate submissions because people could move, people's English proficiency could improve, their work authorization could be different. So depending on what it was, they can reapply, or maybe they realize they made a mistake in their application and they can resubmit it and then it will update our audience panel. Yeah.
Okay, sure.
One record. Yeah.
Got it. And I know you also allow them to book time with you, right? So once the application is done, I think you take them through an interview process. Is that right?
Yeah. So what we do is we want to work with employers to help relieve the burden of finding the workforce, right? So we want to help find the workforce and train them. And so we do something that's called a screening. And so after the application, and if they're eligible, we screen them, which is do an English test, make sure that they're a good fit for the program, make sure they're a good fit for employers. And so once we do that, then we send them to employer partners to meet with them and actually do an interview. So that would be an interview stage for a job and for the next steps, which would lead to enrollment, or they do self-pay. Again, that's new, but we're just doing self-pay now, which means that they don't have to be employer sponsored. They can pay their own way. So if they pass the screening, then they do the enrollment process. And then through that, we could still connect them with employer partners after the program. So it's just a little bit of a different path.
Sure. Thank you, Erin. We have a question from Faiza, and her question is around, do you use block surveys invitation through text or maybe create a survey but with text images? Faisa, would you like to ask your question? So I read it. I think text campaign is coming. This is something that we are working on, SMS campaign. This will be available by end of this month. And that will help you to distribute surveys on SMS messages with follow-ups so that you can get to completion. With interactivity, certainly we are looking at how we can offer more immersiveness, more playfulness in the application or any forms or surveys you create within BlockSurvey. That's something that we are looking into, Faisal. But I think that also leads me to that question. Do you see students drop off? Usually application process is tiring, right? So usually it takes a commitment of at least a minimum of 30 minutes, which means you have to be completely locked in. Do you see at any point in time students dropping off in certain questions or not coming back to fill the
Yeah,
application?
we can look at that. We do see that sometimes people drop off, especially because when we first started, we actually had an interest form to at least get people in the door, but it was hard to get people from the interest form to the application. And so we changed our mind and we decided that we wanted, when we had people, even if it means a little bit sometimes more drop offs, we changed it so that instead of an interest form, you kind of go right into the application because it's not long anyway. So it shouldn't take people 30 minutes to do our application. It is really simple. The screening does a lot of what we need later. So there's not a ton of drop off. But depending on people's tech savviness, sometimes people get through a lot of it and then don't submit. So there's always going to be issues like that. But usually they follow up if they really want them.
Okay. And do you run ads on these also? I remember you were using few of measuring the ad, the source where it is coming from. Can you walk us through a little bit on how does your ad work? What networks are you distributing? Where is your source of applicants coming from right now?
So our marketing team has done the, click ads, like sponsored ads on Google for the most part. So through that, we were able to create a special link that's just for that ad so that we can track a special link to the application so that we can track when people are completing the application from the ads. It's not going to ever be perfect, right? Because someone could click on an ad, click out of it, then go back right after they've seen or heard of us. So it's always going to actually be underestimating how many people came through the ads. But yeah, mostly they're from Google. And we just started that and we've already seen a huge uptick.
Great. Thank you.
Hi everyone. Sorry, I
Hi,
can't
everyone.
open my camera, but thank you very much, Erin. It's very generous, everything that you shared and preparing all the screens. It really opens my mind on possibilities, especially with one of my clients, which is actually a women's center here in Toronto. They work with women in vulnerable context, and I think it could be very useful, everything that you shared. So love it. Thank you so much. And thank you for BlockSurvey to organizing this. Yeah, I'm thinking just outside of the box a bit, following your lead. It seems that you used the invitation in a very different way. So in my mind, I'm wondering now if I can, instead of MailChimp, that I honestly hate, it used to be a good newsletter tool. Now I can't have any interactivity with the people that read. I can't have point of, was this article interesting? Is this workshop that I want to launch interesting? Things like this. So I'm thinking now that maybe mixing invitation plus taking them to a survey where I can put all the pictures, there is conversation that I can add. It's really more fluid, I think. It could be almost an interactive newsletter. I'm just wondering if this is something that you use. So back straight to my question. My question was, do you use also BlockSurvey to communicate with your students outside of the intake process? All this the process that you share just to communicate news or anything else? Or do you have another tool for that?
So we mostly use BlockSurvey for email campaigns. They've, Wilson and Roger have increased its capabilities. It's not going to be like MailChimp or something like that, but it does what we need to do, which is some HTML. We can kind of make an email campaign look nice, attach surveys and stuff, but we have not used it quite in the way that you're talking about. But I think that you could. And I think that you can work with the team to make sure that it's meeting your needs because it sounds like it would meet other people's needs too.
Yeah. Thank you.
So thanks for asking us. And this is something that we wanted to hear from customers also to see how they wanted to use it. Currently, it's not as closer to a full-blown newsletter system, but then has 80% of the capabilities. But then I would love to hear from you if you have some ideas on how you wanted to really have that interactive or the playfulness inside a newsletter. We can certainly take a look at.
Yeah, I already use it for questionnaires this way. I'm not into
Uh-huh.
quantity, it's more of quality of experience that is important for me. So my numbers aren't very high, but I
Uh-huh.
already hear from the people that I survey. It's not really survey, it's reports. I ask them to react to reports. I do evaluation. And it's great. I like playfulness. That's a good word.
Sure. Others, feel free to jump in. Any questions for Erin?
Yeah, I have a question to Erin. Happy to see the flow and picture. Thanks for taking us through. It's
Yeah.
curious in terms of closing the loop with candidates. Do you ask final feedback of either if they reject or they appointed? Do you look for any feedback from the candidates to collect further? How was the process throughout the screening?
Yeah, so we do a end of program survey. So in BlockSurvey, I didn't get to that point, but yeah, even when someone becomes a student and they graduate, we do surveys for them. And then we're also going to do employer partner surveys so that we can track the experience for people. We are very open that we're learning the process and improving the process. And honestly, it's very complex, especially because we want to not treat people like numbers, right? So it becomes very complex, the process. And so we know that there are going to be improvements for it. But yeah.
Great, Erin. Erin, it leads to another question. Do you look for a feedback from employer as well?
Yeah. So we do employer and student feedback in an employer survey. We haven't launched the employer survey yet. We have done some of the student ones, but we are finalizing that and then we'll get that out as well. And then what's nice is you'll have the analytics for each question. And so we don't have to do formulas or anything to get those. It's really cool that we'll be able to just see very quickly, high level, where we can improve and where we're doing well.
Got it, Erin. Makes sense.
And are there any dashboards you have? I remember you were using Smartsheet and also you have some integrations done outside, right? Do you have
Yeah.
dashboards with respect to see how many applicants are coming in day over day or week over month to see how many are applying, how many are getting accepted, how many are getting rejected?
Yeah, so in general, BlockSurvey has been fabulous for this workflow, but it isn't a project management system, right? I mean, that's a lot to ask. Just like Smartsheet isn't a robust survey system, and so we use them in combination. And so what we have been doing is we're trying to find a better way to integrate because we just need to we want to make sure we're compliant the whole way. And so that has been tricky. But right now, we export our audience panel and we import it into Smartsheet and we use formulas in there and to create these nice dashboards that say how many applicants we have, how many are screening eligible, and how many we've screened. Really, where Smartsheet is used is when someone passes a screening, we put it in Smartsheet that is in separate workspaces for our different employers so that we can share their information, so that we can track where they are in the process of interviews, whether they're going to get a job offer, and all of that stuff. So it's all in these separate workspaces, and that can feed into dashboards as well. So yeah, we've supplemented with Smartsheet and BlockSurvey. But to Faye's point, this has been enough where we haven't had to use MailChimp, for example, for this workflow. Between those two, it's been enough.
Sure. Thanks for sharing it.
Yeah.
Anyone else, if you want to ask questions to Erin, feel free to. Great. Erin, I want to thank you for sharing your story with us. I know we worked with you for about a year right now, and I could see how this project started from day one and how we started working together, right? I think so just getting to see this project live. We were immensely happy to see how we were actively using BlockSurvey for application management. And thanks for unbundling and showing us what is the behind this screen, right? So how you put together and how you went about right from evaluating the solution at an early stage. I think that's a big lesson for me also, is to also see whatever stage you are in, how to look for the right software. I remember that you had the checklist with respect to how to evaluate. When there are a lot of unknowns, how to find the right solution, right? So I think thanks for sharing with us. I'm sure that will be helpful for many. And thanks for sharing your workflow, laying it out in charts, in visuals to see the entire process, the whole process. That also helps to see where things fit in, how to get it done. And thanks for sharing that with us. And I appreciate your work, and we are grateful to learn from you today. And thanks you for sharing it with everyone over here. And if any one of you want to create a workflow or a process like this, feel free to get in touch with Erin. Erin is available on LinkedIn. You can search for her. I'll drop the LinkedIn URL on the chat, so feel free to connect with her.
Thank you all so much, and really made it possible for BlockSurvey to be what we need and for us to not always have to outsource stuff. So you've really worked with us to solve problems and make sure that the system's working how I need it to work. So that's really helped us out. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Erin.
Appreciate the collaboration.
I'm just pulling your LinkedIn URL so that I can drop it in the chat. Thank you, everyone. Once again, we thank you for your time, and we'll connect with you again in the next webinar. We look forward to share what we learn from customers and what we are building next. Thank you, Erin. Appreciate your time.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Take care.
Thank you.